Good morning, everyone. I want to call your attention to this announcement that is in our module for this week because we are approaching the end of the quarter. All the assignments to beginning today have a closing date of 10/9. Now, that is 2 full weeks from 9/25 today. However, as we move towards the end of the week, you no longer quite have 2 weeks, and this cannot be avoided because grades have to be in at a certain time at the end of the quarter. So just be aware of that and make sure that you're keeping up on a daily basis so that you don't get behind and then all of a sudden realize there's something that you can't do any longer. So today we're going to focus on some changes that were being made in the South. We're not going to focus so much on wars here, but rather events that are going to cause changes in government. And some of these are economic driving forces that are going to cause changes in government. We'll save the war stuff till eighth grade. I mean, it's till a little bit later in our history class. So your first assignment for today, we're going to do two with what's called the abolitionist movement. And the abolitionist movement is the anti-slavery movement that was gaining ground before the Civil War. The Civil War wasn't only about slavery by any means. It really had a lot more to do, at least at first, with the rights of states to make decisions. And the big disconnect here was who should have more power? Should the states have the most power? Should the federal government have the most power? Many states, and leading the charge in this was South Carolina, said that there were some things that the federal government was doing that they didn't agree with. There was the issue over slavery, and the South felt like they had the right to make their own decisions. And eventually, what they're going to do is say, "We're going to separate from you." And of course, that's the beginnings of the Civil War. So our first thing today is to look at the abolitionist movement, this anti-slavery movement, and we're going to focus today on what's called sectionalism. Okay, the sections basically are that we're going to focus on are the South, which your dividing lines are roughly all the way through Texas over here, the North, which is the Northeast, and a little part of the upper Midwest. The West, really, we're not going to look too much at, but that's kind of the area of contention because as people move further out west, the question becomes, are these new states, are they going to be admitted to as slave states where you could legally own slaves, or are they non-slave states where that is illegal? And that's going to cause this whole cauldron of upheaval for this country. So we'll look at the background of sectionalism and kind of what divides these two regions other than the obvious geography. Their economies are different. Their culture is different. And this ed puzzle is going to sort of go through that with you to sort of explain what sectionalism is. All right. And then we're going to stay on the abolitionist movement, but we're going to look at how it's kind of gaining ground as we move closer and closer to the Civil War, which is going to begin in the 1860s. And again, this is not the only issue that the Civil War is fought over, but it is certainly one of the most major ones that's there. So this will talk about some of the people who were famous for this movement. And then we're going to focus on one in particular that you probably have heard of. This is Harriet Tubman, and she was originally born a slave, but she is going to become probably one of the most famous conductors on the Underground Railroad, which is a network, a secret network that helped enslaved people who were running away from the North escape to freedom, running away from the South to escape to freedom in the North. Later in our unit, we're going to look a little bit more at what happened when they get to the North, because you think, well, everything is great once they make it to the North, but where they're going to find there's still a tremendous amount of discrimination and problems that are going to go with this. So I've asked you to click and read this article about Harriet Tubman. She's a very interesting character. And then in the text box, after you've read her story, I want you to share your reaction. How do you view her? What would you have done if you had been in her place? Because some of the things that she does requires a tremendous amount of courage. I don't know that I would have had that courage in her place. But what would you have done in her place?